Somebody once told me that Shrek is love and Shrek is life, and that the summer of Shrek will bring the greatest content to this channel's history. Unfortunately, though, Shrek Extra Large is definitely not love and life, and it's definitely not one of the greatest games. It's actually kind of awful. What's up? It's me again, Mecha Sandvich, here with another video, and we're reviewing the awful, atrocious disaster that is Shrek Extra Large. This game, I don't even know what to say. It's just, I guess I gotta go step by step. The game starts with like a storybook, like the real movie, like going over the story, but instead of getting interrupted with Smash Mouth and Shrek, nah, it's just this like one voice actress telling you like how the story begins, no cutscene or anything. And it's basically that like Merlin from the first movie, not the third movie, not the first one, but he's not in the movies yet. So they put this character from the third movie in the game. He kidnapped Fiona, I guess, and he's just got this other Ice Queen bitch, and they're teaming up, and it's gonna be like this epic story. And then it jumps you in Shrek Swamp with a magic mirror out of nowhere. Why? Well, the game was originally made for the Xbox, and the Xbox version didn't have a story. That's right. It didn't have a story. It's just that Merlin's bad, you gotta stop him, so you gotta do good deeds. This time they decided to add a story to this GameCube version. Unfortunately, they didn't bother editing the tutorial to align with the rest of the game, so there's no story. And you basically just go through the swamp with the magic mirror, who only appears in this level, even though he was like the narrator of the original version. This one, he only appears in this one level. I don't know why they didn't swap him out or something, but that expects them to put effort into this game. And you learn the controls and everything, the mechanics, the fart mechanic. I guess I should go over the mechanics one by one. The game is basically Mario 64, but bad. You can run, you can jump. Shrek runs a lot faster than you would expect for Shrek. Even more so in the Xbox version, which is just even odd. But, whatever. He also jumps around, like, insane amounts, like even more than Mario. So that's even more odd. And you can punch, and grab and throw. And you can also fart. This is the main mechanic of the game, I guess. The one thing that stands it apart from Banjo-Kazooie and Mario 64, other than being a bad game, unlike those ones. You can fart. And your farts can get supercharged with a fiery explosion with a burp after eating a chili pepper. This is legit a real game mechanic. And this is not a Wario game. In fact, I'm actually surprised no Wario game has ever had a mechanic like this. That it feels like something you'd see in a Wario game. But nah, they never did that in a Wario game. Closest thing is his moveset in Smash. But it is here. So I guess if you wanted to mod Shrek into Smash, I mean, using Wario as your base would be a good idea. And despite having a story, you barely notice. It's actually quite jarring. You just have that storybook thing telling you the story. In like free cutscenes throughout the entire game. That's it. The rest of the game has like no story whatsoever. Oh, and by the way, Shrek does not talk. Like once. Only in the storybooks being read over by someone else. He has no voice lines whatsoever. Not even an impersonator. They just give him a couple grunts and that's it. In fact, I gotta go over because this game does not feel anything like Shrek. Like, other than you're playing as Shrek and you gotta save Fiona, in the very first level being the swamp, it feels nothing like Shrek. Like, at all. The character designs don't feel like Shrek. The world doesn't feel like Shrek. It makes no sense. How is this Shrek? Well, the game was designed visually by Todd McFarlane. That's right, the guy who made Spawn. Todd McFarlane, the Todd father himself, he is the one who designed the character designs. And to be honest, you can't really tell, except for like Red Riding Hood, because she has a big cape and she's a busty woman. That's about it. Everything else, you could not tell that Todd McFarlane designed them at all, but he did, surprisingly. And it just feels like they jumped Shrek in some random game. Some people even wondered if this game was like thrown Shrek in at the last minute to cash in on the movie, which is entirely a possibility. And I have a slight theory about this. Around this same period, Todd McFarlane and his toy company was making these like statues of like dark versions of fairy tales designed by him. That's interesting. Dark versions of fairy tales designed by Todd McFarlane. Almost sounds like what this game is. They were of course way darker than this, but they at least were unique looking characters. And Todd has always said he wanted Spawn and the things he created to cross over into video games and movies. And that leads to the question, was this game originally going to be like a Todd McFarlane fairy tale game? Because why else would Todd McFarlane have created character designs for this game? Because other than that, it doesn't make much sense. And it would explain why Shrek feels so out of place. The timeline does match up, but the character designs for the characters that do cross over between the two are completely different. That said, comparing Humpty Dumpty from that toy line that McFarlane made and the actual Humpty Dumpty in this game, yeah, I can understand why they look completely different. But if you actually look at what Humpty Dumpty does in this game, it actually does line up, doesn't it? Because this Humpty Dumpty is abducting little egg kids and teaching them to jump off walls. Like, he's basically a child killer. That sounds like something that the other design of Humpty Dumpty would have done. Not this one. Anyways, the very first level is this forest level where you have to find the candy for Red Riding Hood. And you also have, like, the merry men around who all have the same voice. And there's no Robin Hood himself. Just the merry men, which is odd. So you can go around, they will attack you, and you have to fight them, basically, or run. But you cannot kill them. That's another interesting thing about this game. There is no way to kill any of the enemies. I have no idea why, but there isn't. And it's not a rating restriction either, because this game is rated T. In other games with this rating have had stuff like that. Heck, even the Lego games let you do stuff like that, and those are rated E10. So a rating issue is definitely not it. This is a weird game design choice, which I have no idea why. I'd assume maybe it's because the studio didn't want Shrek to kill people, but here's the problem, in every other Shrek game that's a platformer, you can. Then again, this was the very first one, so maybe they realized it was that shit, but I don't know. So basically, you go and you have to find the candy, but first you have to get the basket. But before you can do that, you have to go and, like, lead Hansel and Gretel over a bridge. It's a really shitty level. I don't think I can go over every single piece of it, but you basically learn that from this level alone, this game kind of sucks. The platforming sucks. The combat sucks. The graphics don't look very good. Although they were innovative at the time, they have aged terribly. The Xbox version, in fact, does look quite a bit better, but this version is the one with the story and better gameplay, because believe it or not, the Xbox version played even worse. And it also has more unique levels that were not in the Xbox version. So you kind of are stuck without any optimal version, because the graphics on the Xbox version are superior. After this, you move on to the very next level, which I believe is the Mother Goose Land, which is just a pretty shit level, let's be honest. You have to stop Humpty Dumpty and all that. Then after this, you have to fight a dancing cow, and there's also the Big Bad Wolf, who noticeably is not the same Big Bad Wolf from the movie. This is a character that's in the movie. The very first movie, the only movie that existed at this point, and he is a completely different version. This also leans into my theory that this was not originally a Shrek game. This is something that they were making beforehand, and then they threw Shrek into it because easy money. And plus, this was the era of licensed games up the wazoo, and Shrek not having a licensed game right away was kind of noticeable. I mean, everything else did. Why not Shrek? Because this came out originally, this Xbox version, 6 months after the film, a whole half a year. alongside the DVD release, basically. Then after this, you go to non-copyright infringing version of Willy Wonka without Willy Wonka. The Oompa Loompas are basically minions. Like they're like the proto minions. If you look at their character design, they're small, short, yellow guys with goggles on. They're the proto minions. That's what I call them. In fact, I almost wonder, did Illumination rip off Shrek Extra Large character designs? Maybe. This is actually the first level in the Xbox version, which is kind of odd, considering that this is, well, not your typical first level. It's kind of dark and odd and not very fitting. I mean, they even rearranged the order, as this was before Mother Goose Land in the Xbox version, but it's the other way around in this version. Probably because they noticed it's kind of odd to have this be the first level. And also, that whole Red Riding Hood level was not in the original version. You gotta punch some guys in a thing, and you gotta fix a machine, and then you gotta do a wrestling match with this big buff guy who sounds like an idiot, and the guy next to him sounds like Meatwad. So you got Meatwad on the side telling him to do some big move, and then you got this guy who sounds like he sounds like freaking Homsar from Homestar Runner, and he almost looks like a discount Poopsmith. But they don't tell you how you beat him. I had no idea. You basically got to do a super punch, which is the only thing they tell you, and get him out of the ring 3 times over. And that's another big problem with this game. They don't really tell you what you're supposed to do half the time. You basically got to figure it out yourself. And half of these objectives are painfully easy. The other half are so convoluted and stupid that they verge on the realm of insane difficulty. It's more easy than hard, but it is noticeable when it is one of the harder ones. Thankfully, though, after you complete an objective, it saves and you have a checkpoint. So I'm assuming we're never going to have to worry about not having a checkpoint if we ever do die. Because starting over some of these objectives would be insanely stupid. Especially if it were to, say, be the hardest one in the game, but I'd highly doubt they would do that. Next, you go into the sewers below the chocolate factory, and instead of poop, it's chocolate. Haha, funny, funny. And then there's these big marshmallow guys who look like the Stay Puffed Marshmallow Man. And there's also these like dwarf guys that are working on it. It's a pretty crap level. But afterwards, you gotta fight the Ice Queen, who I do not believe was in the original version of the game. They just added her in here. And it's noticeable because she doesn't fit into the story at all. They basically just added her in and add an extra boss fight. She's basically like fought Merlin first, and then Merlin kidnapped Fiona, and she apparently took over Merlin's castle, but that makes no sense because we don't fight her in Merlin's castle. We fight her in the sewers. So I don't know what they were thinking writing this plot. It doesn't add up, and it's really stupid. And again, we have a boss fight that doesn't tell you what you're supposed to do, although you really just have to go around and fart on her a couple times with the explosive farts. Classic Shrek. But once you figure out what you're supposed to do, it's actually pretty damn easy. And then you kill the Ice Queen, the only enemy in the game you can kill, basically. And we're done. We beat her. And then we gotta go on to the next level. We have to go to find out how to get armor by going to the spooky, scary skeleton area. And there's like no explanation of why we're going to the skeleton area other than we need to find armor. But you don't find armor in this area. You're like trying to figure out how. So I don't know how Shrek knew he had to go to the spooky, scary skeleton graveyard, but apparently he did. And this game has a problem I like to call lighting disease, where it's one of those games where half the time the lighting's way too dark, and the other half the time the lighting's way too bright. And this is a peak example of it, because in this level, you can barely tell what's happening at all. Like, you cannot see half the time. And it's very noticeable, because you half the time don't know where the things are that you need to grab. More boring objectives, some crappy voice acting later. You have to commit hate crimes against the witches, and boom, you know you have to go to the mountain. And you go to the mountain, and you meet some giant who's just there. Okay, and you gotta get treasure for him from the leprechaun, who again is just there, and you go and do this. You go chase Hornswoggle around, and you get the treasure from Hornswoggle, the greatest professional wrestler of all time. And then you have to beat up some gnomes, and then you get the armor. Then you have to go to the Crown Prince and his castle. And the objective, the very first objective of this level, and what I am going to assume is the reason that this game is rated T. You gotta get that guy laid. I'm not making that up. That's literally what the objective is. But granted, not for him. For his wife. Because it starts with you getting bitched at by his wife. Basically saying, I never get laid. Get that prince up here so I get laid. So you gotta get this guy laid. That's literally the objective. You gotta get him up there to get laid. I'm not making this up. After this, you then have to beat up a freaking executioner guy who's torturing prisoners. So you have to lock him up. He noticeably looks like El Duce from The Mentors. Very obscure, but he does look like that. And after that, you break out prisoners. And also in the original version of the Xbox, this is the same objective. This is one of the levels that is in both. That game was about doing good deeds, so I guess breaking out random prisoners who could potentially be in there from anything from rape to murder is a good deed. Makes perfect sense to me. You then have to entertain the Crown Prince by farting on his jesters. You can't make this up. It's Shrek game fully. You gotta fart on the jesters. And I believe after this is when you unlock the belly flop move, because certain maneuvers that are in this game you have to unlock by playing the game, such as the super punch, which you unlock before the Willy Wonka ripoff level, and the belly flop, which I believe you unlock right here. Or maybe it was the one before, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. But the problem with this is, these maneuvers are literally used like once or twice maximum. And then never again. They just are there. Like, if you're going to add maneuvers like this, you got to use them more than once or twice, or otherwise it's just a waste of time. But whatever. That's expecting this game to be good, which it very much is not. Because this game does not understand game design. The next level, we have to go to his summer castle, which is actually one of the only funny jokes in this game. He's got a summer castle instead of a summer home. I mean, it's not even that funny. It's just like mildly funny. Mildly funny. And also him getting laid was actually the funniest joke in the game. But seriously, that's it. So you go there, and you gotta, like, get these dragons in water, which is a pain. It's a real pain, because the game is, like, has some terrible AI, and you gotta lead them to the water. And they also do not clarify that you need to use a specific type of knight. And one of those types of knights is not next to this other dragon, but it is next to one of the other ones. And it doesn't explain this at all. So when you do it, you got no idea how to get this dragon. You think it's broken. But no, it's because you need this one specific type of knight. Man, if only the game would tell me that. You then have to go do this specific thing to signal the dragon to come down. You do that. And then you have to go into the place. And here's the worst section of the game, in my opinion. The worst platforming I've ever seen is this area. Because this area has platforming that makes no sense. There's no actual platforms, and you have no idea what direction you're supposed to go to. So you're basically lost for this entire section. You're trying to go up, but it's kind of a pain, and the camera is not helping you at all in this game. The camera is atrocious here. One of the worst cameras I've ever seen in a game. And you basically have all of your challenge from platforming in this game is solely because of the camera. It's because you're wrestling with the camera to get this to work right. And because of how your direction you're like going in is partially designed by the camera and the sticks, and that is part of the platforming, it is a massive pain in the ass, especially in this one area. So you make your way up there, and they just reuse an objective from the earlier level where you have to fart on a dancing cow. I am not making this up. They just reuse an objective from one of the first levels in the game. Like, no shame. They're just reusing an objective. And that's basically the thing. This game has, like, very little unique objectives. Most objectives comes down to one of these three things: beat someone up, fart on someone, or grab something and put it somewhere. That's it. The game doesn't have any unique objectives. And your platforming is rarely ever used to get to somewhere special. If it is, it's just to fart on someone, like here. And that really makes this game feel really lazy. The game also has a soundtrack which feels kind of out of place for a Shrek game. It doesn't really feel like Shrek at all, but here it is. And now we are finally on the last level. Merlin's Tower of Pure Evil, or whatever it's called. It's literally called some goofy, like, Tower of Evil Darkness. It's literally called that. I mean, you couldn't be more on the nose that Merlin's this evil bad guy. Too bad he's in Shrek the Third a couple years later and is actually a good guy who's kind of harmless. Because yes, this is one of those games that suffers from the licensed gameitis, where they put a character from the source material, or in this case, another fairy tale, into this game, who's then used in one of the later things, striking this from the canon entirely. There's no room for this in the canon because of this. That said, they also have the Big Bad Wolf, which also strikes it from the canon because it makes no sense whatsoever. That character is literally in the first movie. But they're also in this game, and they do not line up with that at all. So, you think, oh, it's just another somewhat easy level. But no. This one has these knights that have these fire on their heads, and they're flinging fire at you. And, like, you gotta dodge it, and you also gotta get this TNT and bring it to a wall and blow it up while the fire's going on it. And you go and go and you go. But they'll always stop you. But you can get the first one somewhat easy. Then right when it blows up, there's another one coming right towards you that almost is guaranteed to hit you. Then you go into the next one, and you gotta do the same thing. But here's the thing. You gotta go all the way back to the first TNT area, because that's the only spot you can get the TNT. You gotta keep going back. No checkpoints. You gotta blow up all these doors, back and forth, while they're throwing fire at you. And you assume there's no way to turn the fire off. Except there is. They just never tell you. You just gotta beat on the guys, and they'll stop shooting their fire unless they go up to, like, a torch. So it's not as hard as it looks, but because they don't explain any of this to you, you have no idea what you're doing. But after you figure it out, it's decent enough, although you're almost guaranteed to get hit at least a couple times trying to put their fires out, which would put you about half health. But you can get there, and you finally open it up. You assume, final door, I must get a checkpoint by now. Because I did in the last time there was a thing before a boss, so I must now. Except you don't. There is no checkpoint. And it doesn't explain what you're supposed to do with the boss at all. It basically just says save Fiona and beat Merlin. I tried punching him, I tried farting on him, I tried explosive farting on him. It didn't work. It did nothing. I don't know how to beat this guy. And it's a pain in the ass because, oh yeah, no checkpoints. This game totally sucks. Okay, now we are going to rank the levels in Tier Maker. I made this tier list specifically for this. We have all the tiers, and we have all the levels, and I'm going to go through them in order. But, of course, first I'm going to go through what tiers mean. So, for the S tier, we have Shrektacular. That means you got, like, a near-perfect level. There's no flaws in this level. It's great. That's not going to be any of these levels, spoiler alert. A pretty good level is the A tier. It means your level's pretty good. It's a good level for a platformer. Then you got B for boring. Your level's boring. Self-explanatory. C for crap. Again, self-explanatory. And D, disgustingly awful. Not much else to say except that your level is just so bad. It's got not a single redeeming quality, no humor, no nothing. Something might end up being there. First, we got Shrek Swamp, the tutorial level. I think this is the only level in the game that feels like a Shrek game. But that said, it's a tutorial level, and as such, it's really boring. It also is very jarring that you start into that from the magic mirror right away, and it's like no explanation for why the magic mirror is there. It's just a weird transition. And I gotta be honest, I gotta put this in boring. Because this is not a good level. It's literally a tutorial. I mean, if your tutorial is above boring, then you've done something amazing. Because it's literally a tutorial level. So it's just got to be boring. Then we have Enchanted Forest, which is the first level in the game. It's a GameCube exclusive level. And this level actually has some decent platforming compared to the rest of the game. It's still not good platforming. It's still shit platforming. It's got that terrible section where you gotta guide them. It's just not a good level, but it's still better than most levels in this game. That's not a good thing. Boring. Next, you got Motherloosegand. That's just a freaking terrible level. It's not disgustingly awful. It's got a couple funny moments, but it's crap. It's not even funny. It also got that weird Big Red Roof thing. Then we got Sweetsville. Disgustingly awful. I don't really know anything that redeems it. I mean, it's got the minions. It's weird. It's not a very good level. It's odd. But you know what's? It's not as bad as Molasses Sewers. As much as I dislike Sweetsville, it's crap. It still had a couple weird, funny things like the wrestling ring. Molasses Sewers is just disgustingly awful. There's no real redeeming qualities. It's got the boss fight, but that's it. Lonely Mountain. This one's alright compared to the rest of the game. It's still not a good level, but I mean, it's one of the only decent levels in the game. In any other platform, it would be a pretty bad level. But for Shrek Extra Large, it's a pretty good level. Creepy Crypt, I don't have anything positive for this one. You can't see anything. The only thing I can think of is that it somewhat makes sense. Like, you got a spooky ghost level, just like you get in Mario. So I can understand why it's there, but it's just not good. There's no real redeeming quality. Crown Prince Castle, this might be the best level in the game, because it's the only level that actually got me to laugh. Like, naturally, from a joke in the game. It wasn't a large laugh, it was just a slight chuckle. But that's just the sad fact of the matter. And then we got Blue Dragon's Castle. It's just crap. I mean, I wouldn't call it as bad as Creepy Crypt or Molasses Sewers, but it's still pretty bad. So I have to go with crap. It's on the verge of disgustingly awful. Same as Sweetsville. Next, we got Merlin's Dark Fortress Tower Pure Evil. And before we get there, I just gotta put Blue Dragons in the disgustingly awful because it's just that bad. There's no redeeming quality. I mean, it looks somewhat better than the others, but that's not something that's gonna keep it out. In the Merlin level, it's just bad. There's not a redeeming factor at all. It's just all bad. This game was an Xbox launch title. Imagine getting the original Xbox day one. You have the choice. You could buy Halo or you can buy this shitty Shrek game. And you choose Shrek. I can feel for you, man. Anyway, who made this game anyway? Oh, DICE, the makers of Battlefield. As you can see, this game is quite awful. It's kind of a shame too, because you'd hope that the first Shrek game could at least be passable. But it's not. It's not even passable. It's a pretty terrible game. It doesn't really have any redeeming qualities. The humor doesn't hit, the mechanics don't hit, the levels don't hit, the story doesn't hit. I mean, you don't even have Shrek getting voice acting. Fiona doesn't say a single word, including ones that are in the book not actually voiced. I don't know what else to say. Oh, I do have one more thing to say. Let's look at the cover. You see Donkey's on the cover. Donkey is not in the game at all. He's just on the cover. He's not even in the game. False advertising. Also, I want to point out that in the Xbox version, the Blue Dragon was actually the dragon from the movie. I don't think it was called Blue Dragon's Castle in the Xbox version, but it was the dragon from the movie. That's kind of cool, I guess. At least somewhat attempting to cross it over. But yeah, Donkey is not in either version, but he is on the cover. What the Well, I guess I'm going to have to give this game a final ranking out of 10. 10 being a almost perfect game, and a 1 being a atrocious game. A 2.5 out of 10. I really didn't want to give this game something so low, but I have to, because it's just got nothing going for it. It's really bad. It's not the worst game I've played. I mean, that would have to go to Aqua Teen Hunger Force Zombie Ninja Program. That game has just got... At least that game's got humor, though. That game makes you chuckle for a couple seconds. Then they repeat the same joke over and over again. This one doesn't even have that. That said, I still think this is a more enjoyable gameplay experience, but it's still a pretty awful game. So I'll stand by my rating. Well, I would give the Aqua Teen game a 1 out of 10. I know a 2 out of 10 without the point 0.5 because it does make me chuckle, and it had an exclusive episode of the show on the disc. So just for that alone, it gets an extra point. And also, I mean, if you got that game on clearance, it also includes some of the normal episodes, so it might as well just be a DVD that you play on your PlayStation to watch the show. In that case, that one's usable. This isn't, though. This is a pretty awful game. There's just no reason. There are reasons for the Aqua Teen game, but not for this. So, I hope and pray that whatever the next Shrek game is on this list, it's actually a passable game. But until then, like the video if you like it, dislike it if you want. Susan got all triggered that people were disliking videos, so now you can't see it publicly. But I say just go get the Return YouTube Dislike plugin for Chrome-based browsers. But that's all. Subscribe if you want to. I don't really care. See ya.